Oh, the tulip breaking virus. Okay. Yes, okay, that explains it. I remembered that part. I used to sell tulips for projects. There's a tiny little bit that I need, a tiny little bit, a lot more water. Yeah, I know. You really kind of need to.
We are recording.
Phytochemistry. We'll move over up there and so you can hear me because I'm quiet anyway.
There's a microphone on the top.
Microphone on the top.
We are rolling and we are going to be talking about tulips as we are on our way to the Tulip Festival.
Tulip Festival out in Cremora.
Cremora, okay.
About halfway between Waynesboro and Grotto.
Okay. Halfway between Waynesboro and Grotto.
Spring blooming perennial. Yeah, they're bold.
I'm Trevor Stewart, 1308, and we are here with Kathy, a chocolate.
The dog. Brain. Actually,
they are perennials, they are bulbs. Background on tulips. One of the things that I know a little bit about was the Dutch tulip bubble, the financial bubble, especially because the most valuable of the tulips weren't actually free, but they were affected by a fungus in the soil. And because, much like hydrangeas, soil makeup can affect how a tulip appears. That's about all I know about tulips. They are a spring flower, generally early in the spring, along with daffodils.
You've got the daffodils, you've got the snowdrops, crocuses, some of the little teeny tiny hyacinths, basically the spring bulb.
Yes, spring bulb.
So it's been a long time since I've dealt with tulips. Looking them up, if I can remember correctly on certain things. There are about 75 different species of tulips, and they're divided into four subgroups. And they were originally found stretching from southern Europe to Central Asia. So before the Dutch got hold of them in the 17th century, that's where they were.
Okay.
Adapted to the mountain steppes. They're meant to be growing up in the mountains, so Blue Ridge is an excellent place to find them. But they do really well down in lower areas. That's whatever that fundraiser I used to sell tulips for every year was. They were potentially cultivated as early as the 10th century in that region. They became the symbol of the Ottomans. They were cultivated in Byzantine Constantinople before all the various name changes.
Example.
Now, yes.
Constantinople.
Yes.
Now it's Istanbul.
Yes.
You got a tulip in Constantinople. You got a tulip in Istanbul. It wouldn't just come from Constantinople.
So tulips were cultivated in Byzantine Constantinople as early as 1055.
As early as 1055.
They didn't come to the attention of the Northern Europeans until the 16th century, when diplomats brought them. Let's see. Frequently depicted in Dutch Golden Age pictures. Sorry, not pictures.
Pictures, paintings.
Yes. Netherlands has been the major producer ever since the 17th century. And then the part of the tulip bubble, part of that was the tulip breaking virus that created variegated patterns in the tulip flowers that were admired and valued. Truly broken tulips are not cultivated anymore. The closest available specimens today are part of the group known as Rembrandt, so named because Rembrandt painted some of the most admired frames of his time. Those were the bulbs that I used to sell, and they come in really beautiful color patterns. And so your regular tulip is going to be, the petals are going to be a reasonably same color shade across the entire petal. Down at the very, very bottom where the flower petals all come together to touch the stem, you'll usually have a different color.
Okay.
Rembrandts are blotchy. They look like they spent some time in the court of the Red King.
Okay.
So, they were the wrong color flower and someone decided to paint them to make them look the right way. And out of that group, you also have the carrot Rembrandt. So you've got the blotchy colors and the really pretty shades and different things. And the carrot tulips, the edges are fringed and feathered, and they look like they've been through a hellacious windstorm.
Or been put face down in a blender.
Not quite, because it's not quite that shredded.
Oh.
But they do look like something was picking at them and making feathers out of the very edges of the petals. Really pretty, really wild looking.
I've seen what I was thinking of was they're not daffodils like that.
Yes.
Those are the ones with the edges shredded.
Yeah. You've got fancy daffodils that do look like they lost a fight with a blender.
Right. I love those.
Let's see. Breeding programs produce thousands of hybrids and cultivars in addition to the original species known in horticulture as botanical tulips. If it's not a botanical tulip, then it's a hybrid of something. Yeah, okay. Description.
You know what Dorothea Parker said about horticulture?
The flowers forget around?
No.
What?
You can lead a horticulture, but you can't make mistakes.
I like that one. That's a good one. I do like that. That's a good one. Due to the different breeding programs, you've got your very stylized kid drawing tulip that kind of looks like galloped edges.
Right.
But then from there it branches off, and you've got, aside from colors and the fact that some of them have fringed edges and feathered edges, you've got some that look more like a star, some that look more like a cup with no points on the edges, some that look like nothing but points. It's very varied. Let's see. Large and are usually radially symmetric. depending on who's doing what. Necessarily public, no doubt. They come in a wide variety of colors: reds, yellows, purples, whites. While there are some that have blue in the name, there are none that actually are a true blue. Most of them have a violet tinge to them. The color of a tulip is formed from two pigments working in concert. A base color that is always yellow or white, and a second color that mixes and determines the visibility of it. When you had broken flowers, the breaking occurs when a virus suppresses the production and base color is exposed to the street. To explain Rembrandt was looking like someone planted white flowers and red beans.
It would explain the variation.
Yep. There are lots and lots of colors. There are some black tulips. Queen of Night is the closest to black, although technically it's counted as a dark and glossy maroon purple.
There are very few truly blue flowers or black flowers. But there are, I'm aware that there are.
Yes. Tulips do produce seeds.
Interesting. That is, however, that's not surprising.
No.
There are a lot of bulb plants that produce that bulb. Garlic.
Yep.
Onions.
Yep.
I don't know the carrots.
But they are, they're a root vegetable.
And they produce seeds.
No, I don't think they're a bulb because you eat that part. Most tulips are a bulb. I'm not sure about. I'm not looking up irises right now. That's actually a rise up to the counseling session. Most tulips have no discernible scent. They're mostly just pretty.
Right.
But some are highly scented to a great degree.
Purple cow.
Okay, yes, purple cow. Come in. One of the ones that is
Purple cow.
one of the ones that's considered scented is the brown sugar one and cream upstart. I am not going to pronounce those words. That requires me to be. The closest you're going to get is that word tulip first mentioned in Western Europe in and around 1554 and seemingly derived from the letters of diplomat Ogier Gislin Uzbek, I think. We hope. First appeared in English as Tulipia or Tulipet, entering the language by way of French. And it is thought that originally the word was given to it by people that were growing it, and they were calling it basically a little turban. They are not for sure that that's actually where it came from, but that is currently their best guess, is that it comes from the Persian word for turban. Yes. Whether they do state that they're not sure, and if it is, they're not sure if it's because it looks like a turban or because of translation errors, because we know that happens.
That's quite interesting.
Yep. habitat, they are everywhere. They're mainly distributed along a band corresponding to latitude 40 degrees north from southeast of Europe, and Turkey in the west through the Levant, Syria, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, and the Sinai Peninsula. It extends east through Armenia.
Or a line road. We're nearby.
We are nearby. We are looking for Rockfish Road. Yes. We're looking for Rockfish Road. If you don't see Rockfish Road, then we'll pull over at the next dollar store.
Okay. Well, let's wrap up on the background.
Yes. Toxicity. This is really important. They are part of the lily family. They are poisonous to domestic animals, including and especially cats and dogs. Which, since we have various right, now bluefish, we want rockfish. Rockfish. Yes, rockfish. So we've got a couple of big holidays coming up, like Mother's Day, where everybody wants to give out all those pretty peace lilies and stuff. Keep in mind that the pollen is poisonous to your cats. It's poisonous to your dogs. They're gorgeous flowers. If you're going to give them, great, but be aware of the animals in the house.
That's why these are best for outside.
Yes.
Lilies, orchids.
And, if you see your cat trying to dig up your plants and use bulbs, stop them, because the bulb is the most poisonous part.
Alright, well, they're gonna sign off for now until we get there and hopefully get some interviews.
Yep.
See you guys in a bit.
Yep.
Hello, friends. We're here at the Tulip Festival at Endless View Farm in Cremora, Virginia, and it is amazingly gorgeous weather. The temperature is perfect. The view is incredible. There are mountains in the background, and the tulips are beautifully in bloom. So we are gonna go take some tours, look at some flowers, and hopefully get an interview or two with a few knowledgeable people about tulips. Well, thank you for joining us, friends. Let us begin. Alright, so here we are at Endless View Farm for the Tulip Festival. And why don't you tell us your name and a bit about the farm and what's going on here?
Okay, I'm Bill Patterson. This Endless View Farm is a agritourism. My daughter-in-law is really the brains behind the operation of the end. The whole business we farm about 700 acres. All the sheep and milk and cash grain. Milk so much. Almost the whole life basically. The other day, this 3 years ago, freed up some time to do something else. So,
Why did you get out of the dairy business like that?
oh, that's probably a whole other interview.
Probably.
But basically, the dairy business, we weren't making enough money for the information. In a nutshell, the dairy business was really good to us for the 09 and the recession. Really seemed to come back, and I was getting old enough that I was ready to stop with that. It was short of help. You know, long story, but long story, Nikwork and Dale was Nikwork. Nikwork is 30 years ago.
Okay.
It's just the way the dairy industry is gone. You milk a whole lot of cows.
That is just the way it is these days, and unfortunately it seems to be the way farming is going.
Well, yeah,
It's tending away from the dairy farm,
yeah.
which is very unfortunate.
Very unfortunate. It's tragic, but I'm like it.
It's what it seems to be.
So when we got it, we tried to diversify. We don't really pay it all.
Okay.
I did make sheep.
Okay.
I've been thinking of doing this for several years. Finally, had some labor and time to do it.
That seems to be a really good business model. You know, from what it looks like here, you guys, this is doing great. This has a lot going on.
Well, it's a work in progress. We've been very fortunate people to come out really well, and we're not where we want to be, but we're really hoping to be.
Well, friends at home, you hear that? Come on out to the Tulip Festival. Come on out to Endless View Farm. Check this place out. It is really cool, and you're supporting local, family-owned business when you do that, and that's important.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out. And we've got tulips this year, and we hope to have even more next year. And the weather's been reasonably cooperative. So,
Well, that's wonderful.
Farming, it all depends on the weather.
It really does. Something I heard about farming early on was it's the ultimate gamble.
Well, some ways it is. You got it. I guess you might even say space.
I think I like that better than because I never called myself a gambling man. But I love to farm, but it is a leap of faith, and I think. Well, I think your faith is paying off here. It looks great.
Well, thank you very much.
So, is there anything in particular you think that we would enjoy checking out specifically, even though we're going to try and catch as much of this as we can?
Well, that's a good question. You know, adventurous you are, I believe the kids like to jump and go to the great big slide or river slide. We have a lot of activities for the kids and for the young people. But today the tulips are the big attraction.
Well, I know we're going to see the tulips. I worry I'm a little too sharp and pointy to go on a bouncy pillow. But a slide, those round bale rollers, oh, that looks... I don't, which means it really appeals to me. That looks like I'm going to get hurt doing that.
I don't know if you hurt me, you might take a tough.
Yeah. I think my pride. Let's go with that. Well, thank you very much.
Well, good.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any internet presence that we can people do?
We've got a website, Everything Farm, and Facebook.
All right.
And we will be opening in the fall with peaches and sunflowers.
Ooh.
Maize and pumpkins.
Wow. I think we are going to try and make it back for the fall festival as well.
Well, I certainly hope so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you so
Our
much.
pleasure.
what I see. That one's probably your mama. Very, very pretty goat here. Yes.
So you were saying that one of them looks like a white?
The white one here with the red head, he looks like a boar goat. Or she, sorry, she looks like a boar. On the smaller side, because boar goats are pretty tall. Like their backs go up almost even with your hip, with big goats. But the rest of these look like pygmies, which are really good for brush.
Okay.
They will eat. Most people think that sheep are great for lawn care, and for an actual honest-to-God lawn, they are. But if you're not watching them, they will scalp your ground, and you will have no lawn. Goats will eat the things that sheep won't. They will also eat things you don't want them to eat. But they like brambles, they like brush. So you keep a mixture of both, and then your yard is sort of taken care of without mechanical help. It's not a perfect thing, but if you don't like running a lawnmower every week, it works.
Okay.
If you happen to be someone that does fiber art and have goats that have fibrous coats and sheep that have actual wool, it works even better.
Of course. Hello, friends. We're here at the gastrophilia portion of the episode, and we have with us a fried Uncrustable, a fried Twinkie, and fried Oreos. None of which I have ever tried before. So, we're gonna start with a fried Oreo.
And your lemonade.
We're gonna try and start with some lemonade. There we go. All right. It is chewy and delicious. It's intense. The filling, Oreo filling, when it gets hot, gets a little grainy. But amongst all the other textures, that kind of disappears. Wow, was that good. I'm going to do one more so I can show you the minutes of it. That is really rich. I am diabetes by the end of this. This is more sugar than the Maple Festival.
Maybe, yeah.
In my intake, yes.
More processed sugars. Oh darn.
My Twinkie on a stick fell off my stick. Alright.
Good thing Rockfish's not here.
That is actually really good. And that is a lot better. That was a lot of filling in that last one. Thank you. Ooh. That is a lot of sugar, Fred. A lot of sugar for me to be processing all at once. Hopefully the Uncrustable is slightly less intense.
Right. I'm looking at all the powdered sugar on it. You have only just barely made it to the filling. That is awesome.
It is less intense. I will say that.
That's more of a lunch food.
See the filling in there. Way less. Yeah. Way less of instant diabetes. All right. Well. I wonder what it's trying to tell. Anyway. I feel like the audio recorder is giving me issues, but I don't know what they are at the moment. So, we are going to sign off for now and finish as much of this sugar bomb breakfast as we can. And then we're going to look at some tulips before we get out of here. Thank you for joining us for this, the gastrophilia portion. and we will see you in a bit. Bye.